Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Of course, I have with me Major General Prabdeep Singh, who has been taking us through the Ukraine war for the past 2 weeks and has been telling us what's actually happening on the ground. But this Ukraine war is also building up certain questions with regards to nuclear treaties, especially between Russia and the US. What's happening in that direction is something that we will discuss today. Sir, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Good to be on your show once again, Adi. It's always a
Absolutely.
pleasure. As we see today is the 379th day of the Ukrainian war, and Bakhmut still holds on.
I
Uh,
know.
at the same time, there are reports. The Wagner Group claims that the eastern part of Bakhmut is completely under the control, and there've been about you know 30 odd attacks which have taken place in various parts of surrounding Bakhmut. Now, when you talk of 30 attacks, when you encircle a town or a city, it's a huge area, and as we've always been talking, fighting in built-up areas or in urban centers is a very very tough deal. So there would be around, as they say, 30 points of attack, trying to grapple with the buildings, getting control, and trying to get the Ukrainians out of that area. Now, losses have been large, as we are all aware, and as the media, I mean, we are relying on media. They claim that the Russian losses are as bad as 5 times that of the Ukrainian forces. Now, but this is a Ukrainian radio input, and we also have other inputs claiming otherwise. Now, President Zelensky is also, kind of uh, egging his troops to hold on to Bakhmut, as if that's the only place which is holding the key to the entire fall of Ukraine. And there are about 20,000 to 30,000. That's what the figures which emerge, about 20,000 to 30,000 troops which are holding, or not, I won't say holding, they are fighting in Ukrainian troops which are fighting against the Russians there. 20 to 30,000 is a large number. Now, as we see, they are being kind of, as I said, motivated, enticed, or whatever language you want to use. Basically, he wants to hold on to Bakhmut at all costs. Now, uh, actually, if you really look at it, any communication center that you are looking at, it has various road arteries leading on to various different areas, different locations. There are roads connecting one city to the other city, one village to the other city, and all that. Now, all these arteries have to be cut,
Hmm.
have to be, so that the enemy, or the person who's inside, or the defensive forces are not allowed to get out. Somehow that is not the case here. It's just the eastern part, and maybe certain southeastern part which is under siege, or under the control of the Wagner group, or the
Hmm.
Russians, so to say. So uh, there is enough area for the Ukrainians to move out in a turning move. If you said, if you recollect, there was this term which was being used as turning movement would take place. Turning movement is changing the direction of the attacks. So, if 20 to 30,000 troops, Ukrainian troops are there, they have to fight, and trust me, Bakhmut will take a long time to fall. So that is what is happening. And as you're aware, today there were a large number of missile attacks which took place all over Ukraine, uh, and the Russians even targeted Kiev, Kherson, and
Yeah,
of course Bakhmut. So there are it's all across that the Russians are actually keeping contact, not letting go of what is going to happen, and the momentum is kind of, at least when it comes to indirect and non-contact warfare, they are keeping the front open on all sides, and time will tell. It's going to be a slogging match as I see it, and we are also looking at. We have had reports where the President Zelensky is requesting for arms, and the NATO forces have also kind of agreed to supply the ammunition, which is falling short in a faster time frame. Because without ammunition, nobody is going to hold on.
Yeah.
At the same time, there are reports of the Wagner Group criticizing the Russians, saying that adequate ammunition is not being provided. So, ammunition seems to be the key in this battle,
Mm.
and uh, it will continue. I mean, the shortage of ammunition will continue. The Russians, I don't know, may have to take a pause after the fall of Bakhmut if their ammunition supply is, you know, kind of hindered, or if there is a delay. Now, the challenge here for the NATO forces is how fast can they supply the arms and ammunition that they have promised, or they have promised or declared that they will
Mm.
provide to the Ukrainian forces, because that is the key. And perhaps the full momentum of the Russian so-called offensive, which would have come by, is still being held up, pending that decision. Because I would not want to commit my troops. If I were Russia, I would not commit my troops in that measure until unless I know what the response is going to be. I don't want to fall into a trap that I use all my ammunition, I use all my forces, and then suddenly they get bolstered up. The enemy, in this case, the Ukrainian, gets bolstered up with large number of quantum of weaponry, and then the Russians are at a loss. So there is a kind of wait and watch scenario. That's what I feel is taking place right now, and all this is under the looming shadow of the nuclear threat, and the sword is, hanging, and that's what these threats are all about. Yep.
The nuclear part of it is interesting, sir, because suddenly, we've had wars before, sir, right? And the narrative from the, I won't say the pro-Russian, but the anti-war community in USA says that USA has tried to avoid wars with Russia since the Cold War and all that stuff, which is funny because they've always had conflicts with direct involvement of the Russians and the Chinese and stuff like that, which were nuclear powers. So they've been these proxy wars, but the N word was never used.
That's right.
Why now,
The
sir?
end. Yeah. Why now? Okay. Let's. It's not very simple. You see, firstly, we must understand that nuclear. When you classify nuclear weapons, either they are short range, intermediate range, or long range, right? At the same time, they also qualified and classified as uh, whether they are land based, air based, or seaborne,
Sea waste. Hmm.
right? So these classifications remain. Primarily, it's the range which matters, and the range actually matters for the land-based ones. So remember this, because it is the land-based vectors which have a particular range, right? Airborne, you can go whatever deep and then let them loose. Sea also, how close you can get to the sea and submarine launched. So the range is always qualified from the land vectors. Now that's one, just to clarify. Now, over a period of time, we've had, historically, a large number of treaties which have taken place and which have kind of died their own death. So, what was left were perhaps the INF,
Hmm.
right? Intermediate nuclear, this thing, treaty, forces treaty. Now, what was that all about? It was about intermediate range missiles,
Nuclear missiles.
right? Nuclear missiles.
SS-20s and all that.
Yeah. So what is the range? The range, it was from 500 and it carried on to 5,500. It got also included a part of the short range missiles from 5,000 to 500 to about 1,000, and then 1,000 to 5,500 was the range of the intermediate missiles. Now, it is not very long ago that President Trump, he kind of announced in 2018, he says, "Thank you very much, I'm out of INF." Why was that? Now, INF was between Russia and the US, right? And they said, and it was restricted. It was a kind of a restrictive treaty. Now, though it blamed Russia for not adhering to the terms and conditions of the treaty, but the actual reason for this is not Russia. You know, coming out of the treaty was not Russia as the reason; it is China. The
Okay.
Americans came to a conclusion that, look, we are getting bound by this treaty, whereas China is, free for all. It is continuing to develop its nuclear forces, strategic forces, whereas we are restricting ourselves. We have caught ourselves in a restrictive mode because of Russia. At that particular time, in 2018, 2019, when it was formally, the Americans got out of it in 2019, February, 1st of Feb. Uh, that was because of the Indo-Pacific. Everything to do with Indo-Pacific. China is a threat. China was free to do what it wanted to do, and the Americans had tied themselves down. So they said, okay, Russia doesn't matter at all in the long run today, so we are out of it. So INF went for a 6. So the Russians also followed suit and said, okay, thank you very much, no more INF. So what was left were the long range vectors. When it came to the long range vectors, then they came on to this new start, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty.
Reduction treaty.
Now, in this, the limiting factor was 1,550, 1,550 odd
Weapons.
warheads, right? And 700 long range bombers, weapons, right? So 700 long range, this was the restrictive factor. But this was all that was continuing. And this was actually as late as last year, February itself, it was kind of being ratified and being extended up to 2026 for another period of another 4 years. And the Russians, after us, it was only after the Americans kind of, you know, uh, threatened Russia, that Russia said, okay, thank you very much, I'm withdrawing from this. And that is what has happened. Now the new start is also gone. INF was gone earlier, thanks to the Americans. As far as new start is concerned, Russia said, I'm suspending it. Now, what happens in the suspension part of it? Suspension part of it is that nobody can verify as to what I'm doing. So this new start treaty is suspended. It is not been kind of nullified as such. It is under suspension as far as the Russians are concerned. Now all these verifications, they were allowed to do 18 odd verifications in a year. Those are not now being permitted. So this is what is the current situation. There is no formal treaty existing. That's the status. Now what happens?
Those are dangerous times, sir.
Now these are dangerous times, and there has been very, very clear threat by President Putin. Putin has very, very clearly said that it's not a bluff. If earlier they were talking about the sovereignty part of it. They never mentioned, they never talked about territorial. Now he has said any threat to any of my territory. Earlier it was existential threat. Now it is territorial threat. So there is a shift. You see, if you were threatening my very existence, then I was going to use it. But now it is, even if you are going to attack any of my territories, and my red lines are now the territories. So it's a territorial threat. Now, what is the territorial threat? As we are all aware, he's talked about four provinces, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kherson, and all coming into,
Under Russia's umbrella.
into the Russian fold. So
Mm.
the moment these become Russian territory, what happens?
Including Crimea.
Including Crimea. So if any force, any threat exists to these, to Russian soil as such, he said that I will use all possible means to evict the enemy. So all possible means is a veiled nuclear threat. So this is what is happening right now. Now, there are of course large number of scenarios which have been war gamed, and people are discussing. Uh, uh, the interesting ones are, if if the Russia, or even if the NATO forces, and as far as the NATO forces are concerned, there are only three countries in possession of these nuclear weapons. That is, you know, UK, France, France, then US and UK. These are the only three countries which are part of the NATO, which are in possession of nuclear weapons,
Their own weapons. Mm.
their own weapons. So that is the NATO kind of arsenal, nuclear arsenal with these three countries. Now, if any weaponry is, or tactical or strategic nuclear weapon is used against Russians on Russian soil, there's going to be a massive retaliation. And where that retaliation takes place is not known. Whether it is on American soil, whether it is on British soil, one really doesn't know. So there's going to be a massive retaliation. This, the Americans and the NATO forces well understand. If they try to take on, again, it's an interesting scenario. If the Americans try to take on their nuclear bases in Russia, even before he uses it,
Oh,
what happens?
the dead handle,
In any,
the dead hand switch.
then there is a problem. They know that they can't do it. So the only place the Russians can also use, and perhaps in retaliation, if the Americans want to use, or the NATO forces want to use tactical, is only on the Ukrainian soil.
Aye.
The moment the moment Russia uses outside Ukraine, in Europe, Article 5 gets invoked, right? So the NATO forces and the Americans reserve the right to retaliate in Russia. You understand what's happening?
Absolutely.
So Article 5 comes into place of the Washington Pact, right? So the only place they can be used is in Ukraine. And what can be used in Ukraine?
A small
We're
weapon.
looking at, you're looking at tactical nuclear weapons. Strategic weapons is, in this particular game, any launch of any strategic nuclear weapons is going to be catastrophic for the entire world, right? Now, tactical nuclear weapons is what? These are sub-kiloton, 1 kiloton, and beyond, right? Up to 100. When you talk of Strategic, you're even talking about 1,000 kilotons. Just to put you all wise, uh, the bombs used in Hiroshima, Nagasaki were 15 kilotons.
Small.
Yeah, 15 kilotons. You know, so when you're looking at tactical nuclear weapons, it has to be sub kiloton. Now, what does a sub kiloton tactical nuclear weapon destroy?
Half a city.
A small city,
Mm.
a part of a block in a bigger town,
Mm.
right? So the only thing that happens is the effect as the radiation.
Ji.
The radiation which which travels because of the wind. It could go on towards the Russian soil also. You see, the drift could go into the radiation drift could take place towards Russia or towards Europe. So when you weigh all the pros and cons, and the maximum that the Russians may attempt to use are the TNWs. And we also when we also war game against Pakistan, and Pakistan is also supposed to kind of keeps threatening us with TNWs. So we also see as to what are the scenarios in which they can be utilized, and like one is visualizing a nuclear blast like what happened in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, right? That's the image that all of us carry, uh, where thousands and thousands of people died. But here, when you're looking at a sub-kiloton or a kiloton kind of a tactical nuclear weapon, sub-kiloton primarily, uh, which is carried in an RT shell,
Mm.
you know, 11-inch RT shell can carry that much, and then the effect of which is going to be uh, destroying a couple of blocks in a city,
Blocks. Mm.
right? The As far as the nuclear weapons is concerned. So what I was coming to is that how are they going to get delivered? They could be delivered through normal artillery shells, which are modified, which are especially meant for carrying nuclear weapons. They could be based through the air, right? So sea launched. We're looking at from the Black Sea side. So these weapons do exist. Uh, the Russians are supposed to have about 2,000 such tactical nuclear weapons. So
Thousand.
that is what it is. And the NATO forces, it is known they have bordering Ukraine on the eastern side, on the Eastern Europe, they have about 200 such warheads which are deployed. So
M61.
there is considerable amount of weaponry which is already existing. Yeah.
The M61 bombs.
Yes. So when you're looking at I think what is going to happen if it is used, say for example,
Mm.
it's used in Russia. Russians use it in Ukraine, a tactical nuclear weapon. Now, how does the world react? What happens as the first step? What's going to happen? There's going to be chaos in the world.
The
We agree
entire
to
order
that.
falls apart. Mm.
The markets are going to crash. The economy, I mean, people are going to go berserk. European cities, there's going to be, people are going to start moving out
Yeah. Europe is
of the
finished.
city.
Correct.
There's going to be a panic situation which is going to take place. Whether more tactical nuclear weapons will be used thereafter or not, that's a different story. There will be a mass. I mean, there'll be chaos all over the world. I mean, on the diplomatic front, on the economic front, any front which you look at. Now, how do you retaliate? Do you go on to a full scale nuclear war? wherein just because the Russians have used a tactical nuclear weapon, you react, the Americans react, the world reacts, and starts taking on targets on within Russia. If that happens, then the Russians will use launch and counter offensive as far as the retaliation will be there. So this kind of a thing is going to, result in what, as has been said, an Armageddon kind of a situation,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? The second thing is, don't react at all. Contain it.
Which is the most probable one.
So if you just don't react to it, uh, so what happens? The world will get emboldened by using tactical nuclear weapons. Nothing happens. A few hundred people died, not thousands, because it's a tactical nuclear weapon. You're talking at casualties in about hundreds. So a few hundred people died. We avoided a nuclear war. So the rest of the world, China, Pakistan, North Korea,
Iran, so many countries.
Iran. So everybody says, okay, fine, this is acceptable now. So the normalization situation would take place. Nuclear normalization. It's an accepted thing. It's fine. I mean, fine. We don't want to, escalate it into something big. That's a situation also which can take place.
You brought out
Now,
a
what
very
would happen?
scary
What would
scenario, sir.
happen? Yes. Now, what would happen? All these other countries which do not possess nuclear weapons will start also running around and start acquiring nuclear weapons.
The threshold countries, sir.
Yeah. So the
There's so
threshold
many of
countries
them.
is okay, fine. I mean, there are no treaties in any case. NPT was those 5 countries and 191 signatories, fine. But we can also use tactical nuclear weapons because it's normal to use tactical nuclear weapons. And Russia is emboldened, it uses more. So this is kind of normalization of the nuclear weapons which may take place.
You know,
Possible?
that's the whole thing. I mean, we always heard this nuclear rhetoric from Pakistan. Even when India and China
Yeah.
are at loggerheads with each other, nobody says anything about nuclear. As a matter of fact, I think both the countries tell their nuclear forces just shut up and sit on the side. Don't even. There's no signals that are going to go, because that's the maturity of, I guess, on part of India and China, at least, if I may. But that's not what
Yes.
we see in Pakistan. We see the Pakistani nuclear syndrome actually playing out in Europe today. Uh,
Yeah. I was coming to the third scenario wherein it's a kind of the threat of using nuclear weapons and blackmailing. So the nuclear blackmail, what Pakis today are, kind of trying to do with India. So if the world lets this happen, and the Russia is continue to allowed to continue blackmailing and say that you do this, I'll use this. So everybody's sitting tight. So this kind of a blackmail will also start getting accepted because you do not know as to what is the threshold, what is the red lines, and in what kind of a scenario will the other person actually use, may use or may not use. So you had the full scale thing, which will happen, which could happen. You could have normalization of nuclear weapons, and third thing would be a nuclear blackmail, which could happen. And of course, the fourth and the last is total avoidance,
mm,
which is an ideal condition, and which
I
is
do.
in this particular war, it is kind of since the threat has already been given, so that while avoidance may take place, but the threat is already there. The blackmail part of it, if you want to call it a blackmail, it exists because now it is not existential threat; it is territorial threat. The Russians have modified that, red line. So you come into my territory, I'm so sorry. You fool around with me. So things are getting interesting, and I'm sure all those who are into the business of studying this nuclear warfare are very much at edge on the, sitting at the edge of the seats to find out as to what exactly is going on, because this is
Exactly.
very serious matter.
What we have.
And another interesting aspect of all this is that opposing forces, whether it's the Americans, or when it concerns to Russia, or whether it is China, or whether it's Iran, or whether it's this thing, Korea, trust me, they know exactly as to where the silos are. They know exactly when uh, you know the vehicles move out. They know exactly where they will go and where they'll fire from. They are monitored on a 24/7 basis, uh, very regularly. So if any country feels that they can, the game in this is to be able to hide your signatures,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
right? Because they are under. I don't want to go beyond the limit because I know quite a bit. So I'll not comment on those, but holding on to your signatures, not allowing the enemy to come to know as to where are you going to take it off from. Have you moved? Have you deployed? Have you armed?
That nobody will know. Yes, sir.
You see, the safety aspect. What is the safety aspect? The safety aspect is till such time you are made combat ready. The mating of the fissile material with the warhead, or yeah, with the warhead. The warhead is the one which is going to carry it. So the mating of the fissile material, that is the nuclear material, with the warhead, that mating, that's why they kept poles apart. They're not kept together, so that there's not even a chance of an accidental, kind of let loose, which may take place out of confusion or anything. But interestingly, uh, if you recall, about a year back, immediately after the Ukrainian war, the Russians stepped into Ukraine. President Putin had declared all his strategic nuclear forces to be
Forces
combat
over.
ready.
Mm.
This was all about that. When you're in a peacetime, you do not want accidental discharge, accidental, firings of such weaponry. So they are kept unmated. But the moment you make it combat ready, that is, you mate the weapon system with the nuclear material and get deployed. And once deployed, you could be, immediately the launch orders can be given. So this kind of thing takes place. Everybody knows. And as I said earlier, the trick is how you can hide it. Go back to Pokhran.
I mean,
Okay.
there's no better example than that, sir.
Yeah. So these are things which are going to take place.
Absolutely, there's no better example than that, sir. Sir, but just I have two short questions, and after that, guys, I want your questions in so that we can discuss what you guys have in mind with regards to the nuclear rhetoric and what's happening with uh, you know with the entire game. So my main question to you would be about the factor that we have a setup which is established in the world with regards to nuclear weapons. Uh, the setup is that it's there, it's there, and it's there with mature countries, and they're not going to do certain things. When you start doing this, then do you see coming back to the era of nuclear patrolling, of staging and stuff like that used to happen before? Nuclear armed patrolling used to take place, and we've had broken arrow incidents, we've had multiple issues Do you see it coming back to that sort of a heated scenario, or is this going to be a free for all arms race opening up?
Yeah, good question. You see, while you have the scenario is actually uh, getting very complicated. The whole world, the nuclear scenario is getting complicated. We're not just looking at terrorism, right? So we're not just
Mm.
looking at just about. I'm going to deviate a little, just try and cover up a few issues here itself. So you have terrorism and you have dirty bombs, right? And dirty bombs today can be created by any, you Google and you go on YouTube, and I'm sure you can find it. You go onto the dark web and you have all the videos to show you as to how to assemble one, right? So the dark web is full of all this. So what I was coming to is that there is terrorism. Then there is cyber terrorism. Cyber warfare has reached, um, advanced stages.
Extremes,
People,
yes, sir.
people can hack into your systems, and people, if they hack into your nuclear command and control systems, which of course by and large are foolproof, but you cannot rule out something like that taking place. So it could be an outside agency, I mean, far fetched, but possible. An outside agency taking control remotely of your nuclear devices. So these kind of things are going to happen. Now, as far as you said that, are we going to get back to an era where there are checks and balances, or it's going to be a free for all? Today, as it seems, let's just count the countries which have got nuclear, stockpiles. Five countries, NPT
Correct.
countries:
Mm.
US, France, China, right, Russia, and UK. Five countries. These are the ones which are declared NPT and supposed to adhere to kind of NPT. Then you have India, Pakistan, North Korea,
Mhm.
which are not signatories to the NPT. And then you have also Israel, which is in possession of nuclear weapons, which is recognized as such. And then you have Iran, and Iran also coming about and talking about nuclear weapons. And perhaps in the
Threshold
Middle
pass.
East also, in the Middle East also, there are rumors that a particular nation is being assisted by our neighbor. So there are rumors to that effect, and so it's already coming into an era where it's actually increasing. The threat is increasing day by day. Why? Because of the power that you become when you have a nuclear weapon. You can hold somebody else to ransom. The nuclear blackmail part of it.
Mm.
So if I have a nuclear weapon at my disposal, I am more powerful. Why? Because I can launch it and cause massive destruction. So it is kind of, the tendency is to for these nuclear threats to increase day by day. Now China, China has a declared this thing of, let me just tell you,
Conditional
China
no
has
first use.
350.
Mm.
Yeah, it talks of no first use, but it has about 350 declared, I mean, known warheads.
Warhead, sir.
But by 2035, when it is supposed to, it is declared is going to be fully modernized by 2035 and become world's number one by 2050. By 2035, it is expected that they'll have about 1,000 nuclear warheads. So China is steadily and growing as far as the strategic forces are concerned. Doesn't you know that they are at it and they are not bound by any treaty as such. In fact, there was a talk of There was some discussion wherein they said that there should be a joint treaty between Russia, China, and America to limit the nuclear weapons.
Numbers.
But China somehow never has come into the play. Has never come into the picture. There's no agreement per se. Just that it is a signatory of the NPT and end of story. 1964 assigned the NPT. That's it. So there is an issue here. China is growing its might, its weapon systems. It's growing. It's going to have about 1,000 by 2035, and that is from a level of 350 as of today. That is increasing 3 times. So even the Pakistanis have got more than us, right? We've got less. India is known to have much lesser quantity as than the Pakistanis. So this threat is not going to go away. People are going to, and if this threat is pulled through in the Ukraine war by Russia, trust me, it is going to embolden a large number of countries to pursue, this, they're going to start getting into this nuclear warfare domain. Yeah. So it's
That's
not
the
free
big,
for all. Yes.
that's the big problem, sir. That when threshold powers, there are so many of them. Of course, South Korea, Japan. Some people say that even Taiwan has a hidden small little program of their own. Uh, when these guys start arming, then it's a bit of a challenge. Of course, I think that's what a lot of people would have said before India tested their weapons, and said, yeah, if these guys arm up, it'll be a challenge. So I don't know whether it's actually going to be a challenge, or it's going to stabilize the entire world and ensure no long wars actually take place. It can be of dual things. What would you say to that, sir? A lot of
Where,
proponents.
who's going to bring about stability? Tell me. Which agency, which power, which group is going to come about and decide? I want to know that. Tell me one agency. You can have the IAEA. You can have the Office of Disarmament. In the UN headquarters. You tell me if the UN is as of now functional. So if the United Nations is
Won't it?
not functional, if AIA today, which is supposed to inspect the sites and which does a good job, but then Iraq happened,
Yes.
without them having anything, uh, possessing any of these the nuclear weapons of mass destruction. But Iraq happened. It was made to happen. So, which agency is going to bring about all this together? G20, we just know it was an economic forum, so it didn't work out. You got Quad coming up, you got AUKUS coming up. I mean, you show me a common thread, which a same common agency which will say stop it. On the contrary, it's being encouraged by everybody.
That's
You
my
see, this
point, sir.
war is.
Won't it come to a point of the mad situation, mutually assured destruction? So,
You see, mad kind of a thing is understood by everybody.
mm,
Once now, what is our policy? I mean, let's talk of our policy, Indian policy. No first use, fine. If you use it against us, you will meet up with a strong retaliation,
massive retaliation, yes, sir.
massive retaliation. So you finger me, I'm so sorry, I'm going to sort you out in layman's
And
word.
in that, also, the escalation ladder remains in our hand, because
Correct.
the response can be a
The res-
hydrogen bomb for a nuclear weapon.
Correct.
Mm.
So the what I'm trying to say is mad part of it is understood by all. It's not that they don't understand. But will the launch of a nuclear weapon by Russia stop this war?
Nope.
Like it stopped the World War II? if that's going to happen, then good. Maybe another, we'll have another, God knows which organization which will come about to say, okay, end of it, no more. Are we looking at that kind of a scenario? So these are very, very difficult times, and I think the nuclear scientists, I mean, the scholars who study nuclear science, all this is who are studying all this, are really on tender hooks because they really don't know where it is headed and where the world is headed as far as nuclear warfare is concerned.
When I just before I get into the question, so when I actually thought about this, for me, the subject of nuclear weapons, especially for people who have been born after the 90s, uh, has not been as ingrained as to anything else. At least in India, we know, okay, India, Pakistan, nuclear weapon, and this and that. But then, if people who were born in the 80s, early 90s, who have probably have some remembrance of the Soviet Union, and of course, the elder generation who has the remembrance of the Cold War, and especially guys who lived through 62 and the Cuban Missile Crisis, they understand what it means. They understand what is the destructive power. I don't think that understanding is there in the game today, sir, because the way the rhetoric has been on, it actually begs the question that do they even understand the factor that it can this is you just don't go here.
You're very right. Your observation on this is absolutely right. As of today, I think there are about 13,100 nuclear warheads in the entire world. So I don't know if you multiply with the TNT, which equivalent of theirs, I
Oof.
think you can just imagine as to what will happen to Earth. Maybe Earth will
In
just
half a
disappear.
second before it-
Right. So now the present generation is absolutely unaware.
Mm.
And it is like it's a threat which is just given, not realizing as to what catastrophic effects it has. It doesn't. They don't realize the blast effect, the radiation effect, the electromagnetic effect. I mean, all that is not understood by people. And unfortunately, for all those who are there in the war zone, the civilians, the soldiers who are fighting in the war zone, they know they are the ones who have experienced it. They know as to what it means to be at war. And whether it is Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Vietnam, what have you, people who have faced it, they know what destruction is all about. And today's generation, I'm so sorry, has no clue. Uh, it is also sad to see that they're on video games playing such games, you know, and talking about nuclear weapons as part of some game as such. Mm, they're the ones who are looking at drone warfare and dropping bombs, but through the drones, and they enjoy fighting on their mobiles or on the gaming devices. And we are propagating a lot of violence without people understanding the value of life, which
Yeah,
is a sad part. And trust me, I don't think people understand.
yeah, absolutely not, sir.
And unfortunately, it is these the defense contractors, the defense industries, which are profiting from all this. The oil industry, the energy, related companies which are there. Uh, I discovered a very interesting fact today.
Sir,
I was just reading. Do you know that China owns about 5% of land in Ukraine?
I heard it was seven, sir.
Owns
Agricultural
about
land.
7%, 5%, but in China is on lease for 50 years. It has land
Yeah.
in Ukraine. So obviously it has interests there. And when it has interest there, well, let us not have a situation where they're also sitting on the borders of Ukraine. So, and that's my big worry.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Sir. I mean, I'd really recommend everybody to please type SAR Bomba, the largest
Yeah,
nuclear weapon ever dropped, and see the blast impact and see the size of the blast and see the explosion itself. Uh, It scared the hell out of me when I saw that. Uh, it's
you
unbelievable
see,
that
we are
people.
also, yeah, we are also looking at, fine, if it's a deliberate kind of a drop, launch of a nuclear weapon, we still know it's deliberate, right? But what about accidents? What about miscalculations?
64 broken arrows, out of which one is still missing, sir.
Yeah.
The British
So,
Columbia bomb is still missing.
yes. So these are the things which we got to be, worried about,
Yeah, yeah,
much
yeah.
worried about.
Accidents
You,
do happen.
you, you are aware how many of our scientists are missing, have been eliminated. You know what, how North Korea got their nuclear weapons.
Hmm.
You know how Pakistan got the nuclear weapons from China. So all that has happening in a very clandestine manner, and that's a cause of serious concern actually. God knows how many other countries are there, and of course, few we know, but God knows when it comes, you suddenly discover there's an Islamic bomb and there's an African bomb as well. So there's going to be a little problem. I'm just saying, I mean, these are conjectures, but I'm just saying. We're talking about an Islamic bomb, right? Pakistan, Islamic bomb does that. And maybe there's another one coming in the offing. And say every continent is wanting to have its own, then I'm afraid, my friend, things are going to be very, very nasty.
Very nasty, sir.
Yeah.
So,
So
one of the very regular subscriber, Venki Sabe, sent me a message saying that Xinjiang Production and Construction Corporation bought 9% of Ukraine's famously fertile farmland, equal to 5%. So, you were right, sir, of the country's total territory with a 50-year lease.
yeah, that's what I
Interesting.
said.
Thanks, Venki Sabe, for bringing that up.
So the dynamics, they're all. eh, While we talk nuclear, but then you look at the interest of so many countries in a particular area, it's not funny.
Yeah, yeah.
And these things only come to light when you actually delve deep into as to what is happening. Now, when we talk of nuclear reactors, it's not just 15 nuclear reactors in Ukraine, four nuclear plants. 50% of the energy in Ukraine is provided through nuclear plants, four such plants. Zaporizhia has six nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
So these are all, after all, any damage to any of these reactors is going to have a lot of effect on the surrounding areas, the
Chernobyl, sir.
radiation effect. Yeah. So the safeguarding of these should is a major concern, and has been, of course, highlighted earlier also uh, in the by all the agencies and by the United Nations, and the concern has been there. But an accidental, discharge of radiation, a radiation leak like Chernobyl takes place, trust me, the thing's going to be very, very bad and ugly. So 15 reactors is not small, and six are concentrated there itself. And why does Ukraine? We are all aware that Ukraine had the massive, I mean, a large number of the Russian stockpile warheads were deployed there, and it is only after the fall of the USSR and they came to an agreement. I mean, the start of the war is this only. Ukraine
Was it-
background, if you go around, yeah. So they agreed to dismantle, and they were dismantled. So that was sane voices. But today, that sanity seems to have gone out of the window, and we have a situation which could lead to a massive catastrophe could take place. Yeah.
That's scary. Let's get into some questions, sir. And before that, guys, please like this video, subscribe. You know the drill. If you can, please support Dev Talks with a QR code. You can become members or send us a super sticker, super chat. Thank you so much. By the way, we've crossed 15,000, and I think we should have crossed, I've not checked, but 15,100 subscribers. So thank you all for becoming a part of the Dev Talks family. It's really, really heartening to be building up.
That's nice. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. General sir, your thought on why Russia is not using its air force in Ukraine, and if Russian air force is inferior in quality, does IAF need to worry? This question keeps coming up. Last time also you had given an answer, but
Mhm. Good question, and yeah, we all wonder as to why the Russians are not using their air force. And if Russian air force is inferior quality, then IF needs to worry about it. Trust me, IF doesn't have to worry about it. It is not the quality of the machine which is inferior. It's quite superior, and our Su-30 MKIs are very good. Why they're not using? I would put it this way that they they're conserving their air force. If I may just put it bluntly, they're conserving the air force because a large number of you know air defense uh, weapons which have been deployed, which have been provided by the NATO countries, and they're also gauging as to what kind of whether the Ukrainians are going to, we heard that about two pilots are being trained in the United
F-16.
States. Yeah. So uh, they're waiting and watching. They will perhaps use it if they really want to use it. They will use it at the opportune time, and
Sir,
they don't want to suffer losses just like that.
sir.
Yeah.
So this is an internal communication, but I found this internal means the people talking amongst themselves. But I find this comment to be very, very interesting, and this is something I see as as the reality that the problem with the American and Indian commentators is that if the Russians are not following either the American or Indian doctrine, then they are failed. Russia is following Russian doctrine, and ROE comes from Putin. I I mean I think I am in agreement with what is been mentioned here, sir.
No, that you see, that's with every country. I mean, when I look at it, I will look at it from my point of view, because as far as India is concerned, we have a specific war fighting doctrine,
Doctrine,
right? So we follow a particular doctrine. The Russians follow their own doctrine, and so the Americans follow their own doctrine.
yeah. The Russians love the
So
meat grinders.
yeah, I mean, these are doctrines which are laid out, and everybody and every commentator will try and look at it from his perspective because that is what he'll relate it to his doctrine, is what I would like to say. Yeah. So they are following what they want to do. I mean, how they want to do.
So, so hope this war does not escalate into World War III. Chances of something like that happening, sir. Chances of this war. Okay, let me not say World War III, but chances of this war getting into another European country. We see these massive protests in Georgia. So fingering is on.
You see, World War Three
Not World
today
War
the
III, but
world.
overspill.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's look at it in a very pragmatic manner. This in Russian in going into Ukraine, what has happened? It has caused a lot of pain to the Europeans, hasn't it? It has caused a lot of energy crisis all over in Europe, Western Europe, UK, everywhere. I mean, the recession has, as it is, was taking place, and now it has come to a stage where people are coming out of the street and saying, "Thank you very much. We don't need a war." So it has affected a majority. I would say a majority, a part of the world. the Europe and the American heartland. I mean, it has affected. It
Hmm.
hasn't affected Africa, it hasn't affected South America in a big way, but then it has affected. Everybody is involved. Today, I and you are discussing this. Aren't we involved? So, the involvement of the entire world has taken place. Everybody is realigning their priorities. Russia and China has gotten together much closer. America, which was losing relevance in Europe, has become very relevant as far as today is concerned in Europe. China is kind of thinking Taiwan, and I mean everybody's thought process has changed. So we are actually studying this war for future outcomes.
Yeah,
So in a way, we are all involved.
absolutely.
It's an economic war. Today it's all paisa. It's economics. In the end of it all, it's all economics. It's all economic power, which is going to, what happens when you go to war? When a country goes to war, you suffer economically. You suffer the losses, all right. That, loss of life, humanitarian life, that's one part. What else does happen? You go down economically. So without fighting, if you have been brought down, I think you are at war, already at war. Without loss of human life elsewhere, economically the countries have been brought down.
That's an interesting perspective, sir.
So you are actually affected by this war, and you are at war.
You could call it an
Some people are
economic Cold
talking
War,
about
actually.
sanctions. Yeah, you're talking about sanctions against some country. But you're saying why should I feed? Why should I supply weapons to Ukraine? Look inwards. Everybody is affected. So
Yeah,
you are willy nilly at war. Everybody is interested. Everybody is involved.
the
Everybody
simplest
is
one.
looking as to how this war is going to shape the world.
Yeah,
So you look at that. The economic consequences of a war are much more are very very high, and that kind of effect has already taken place.
I think Vasuki, when you put out this question, you didn't think that it would bring about this thing. It never clicked me, but today it does when you just mentioned it. You're at war at the end of it. This is economic war. I mean, we are on the winning side of it, so we are able to kind of help ourselves. But if you look at other countries, they're not. You don't get tomatoes and cucumbers in the UK. So there's a whole lot of back ending, which I think this thing, and that's what this comment says. Ukraine and Russia war is the friction between liberal democracy of NATO and autocracy in Russia, which can also be considered as two tectonic plates of politics.
Fantastic statement, Mark. I must compliment you on this. It is, in fact, just that. I mean, geopolitics, there's, you know, again, this liberal democracy part of NATO. I, I, I would, urge you to read the statement of the Chinese, which has come out, I think, yesterday. Uh, for the first time, they
They're
have
calling it
officially
this.
condemned and named the United States.
Yeah,
So I will urge you to kindly read that statement and how very bluntly have they kind of tried to castrate the United
US.
States. So once you look at it, and it does make you realize that this liberal democracy perhaps is quite a sham.
Quite
So
a sham, sir.
yeah, so this I really do not kind of go with this term of liberal democracy of NATO and autocracy of Russia. Yes, it exists, and perhaps that is why let's go back to Russia also. Okay, let's take our mind back to about say 15-20 years. and Russia was kind of deep down economically. Russia was kind of not being considered as any worthwhile country, right or wrong.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Yeah, slowly and slowly, uh, thanks to the autocratic ruler, the might of Russia, I mean, whatever manner you want to consider it, the
Yeah,
he has increased it. I mean, you look at Georgia, you look at Crimea, you look at today, you look at Ukraine. They're coming back to reclaim their so-called areas. So there is a rise as far as Russia is concerned, and liberal democracy fine, tectonic plates is fine. There is a conflict is fine, but request you to read the Chinese statement also. It's an eye opener. I quite enjoyed reading it.
yeah.
We've got
So here is the thing. I don't see a distinction between existential and territorial. Russia's nuclear doctrine can deter conventional conflict like the US. No other nuclear power can deter conventional conflicts like the big two.
I don't see a distinction between exit. Yes. Now, while you may not, John, you may not, we do know John Doe is.
He's a very regular, but
I know it's not his real name. He must be a good guy, an interesting person. That's why he's named himself John Doe. And we don't have Jane Does, and if we had Jane Does also, we would know as to yes, there are two people. Anyway, good, John. Uh, there is a distinction. Firstly, when you talked of existential threat, you're talking generic. Actually, you're not going to be wiped out from the face of the earth. So you leave it vague. Only if my existence is affected will I use nuclear weapons. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get wiped out. But the moment you make it territorial and you say that, yeah, this is my area, my territory, you affect my territory, I'll sort you out. And you extend the territory round by four blants or counties or districts, whatever you want to call it, regions. So he has specified it. Earlier, it was in the realm of never going to happen, but now it's defined. So I think there is a clear distinction, and
I think
there is. I mean, I would like to counter this. And as far as the deterrence, it can deter a conventional conflict. As of now, it is deterring. Is it deterring? It hasn't deterred the Americans, right? It hasn't
it's
deterred anybody. The conventional war continues, even with a threat.
it's deterred the Americans to enter the war, sir.
Definitely.
So half. I mean,
No, it has actually, you know, it is going to happen. The moment this is a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's a proxy war.
gee,
It's a proxy war. I mean, you sent me today, and let me just quote these figures for the rest of the people.
the
While we
Mossad.
may, yeah, while we may say that the Americans are not involved or the people or Europeans are not involved, let me just read it out for the benefit of the rest of it. 234 NATO officers, trainers, and agents have died. 2,458 NATO soldiers have died. A total of 5,360 mercenaries have been killed. I mean, these figures are normally not available, but definitely they haven't been invented, right? And this input is from the Israeli Mossad, so to say. And trust me, they are very good. So it lists out all the losses.
Yep.
So so there are people, there is involvement. You take an American aircraft over Ukrainian airspace, have it piloted by an American, and then see the reaction what the Russians would do. So this is indirectly people have been fighting in Ukraine, and well, they've been killed, and I'm sure they're still fighting. They were always
I'm
there.
sure. Oh yeah, yeah. There are YouTube videos, sir. There are guys who've taken their GoPro cams and actually gone into the fight uh, and filmed stuff and put it back up, and they're there. I mean, there's so many of them, so you can search. I won't name any of them on the show, but if
So
anybody wants, let me know. I'll be sure to link, you know, share you the links.
as far as deterrence is concerned, yes, nuclear war is always meant for deterrence, but here is a threat which doesn't seem to have threatened to that degree. But yes, if there is a direct involvement, then I'm sure things would be different.
So, ask General Sir, Jai Hind Sir, your views on the likelihood of Pakistan selling a few dirty oranges to Kiev. Oh my God.
Yeah, as of now, they are begging for money. So, if I may just put it lightly, uh, I I won't be surprised. Is all I can say. But
Really, sir?
no, yeah, I mean, didn't they do that to what did they do to who got where did North Korea get them from?
Yeah, I know Benazir Bhutto gave that, but do you think the
Yeah,
Pakistanis would have? Oh my.
yeah. I mean, why not? Paisa chahiye. I need money. I'm starving. You helped me all the while. You gave me 320 T-80 UDs.
Hmm.
Ukrainians gave them 320 T-80 UDs, the mainstay of the main MBTs of the Pakistan Army.
Yeah.
They're the ones who supply them large amount of equipment. The battle tanks were there, the APCs were there, are there. So they have a lot of trade going on. They're supplying them with ammunition. So I mean, trust them. They can do anything. They can go to any extent. Today, what is the major fear today in the world? It's not Pakistan's disintegration. They couldn't care a damn. The world wouldn't care a damn about Pakistan's disintegration, but for the nuclear facilities. Everybody is worried about that falling into rogue hands. While the Pakistan armed forces, they do claim that they have a very robust system in place, which I would believe them also to a great extent. After all, they're a professional army. They're not. They may be. We may be their enemies. They may be our enemies, but they are a professional army in their own way. So, but you never know. Terrorism. I wouldn't say just Pakistan. It could be anybody. It could be any rogue element anywhere. How do you make a dirty bomb? Dirty orange. I like the word.
The
Uh,
Israelis did some tests and realized that damn things are useless.
yeah, but how do you make them? I'm just dirty. You want to make a dirty bomb? It's available everywhere, anywhere in the country. By the way,
Make it.
freely available.
You
Material
can
is
make.
freely available.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
what cesium 235. That's U35 235. It's an isotope which is available in any cancer hospital. So you go into lab, you can. I mean, if it's not, if it has to be misused, it's available
Radioactive
for people.
substances बहुत सारे हैं, sir. Mercury will become a bloody bad dirty
No,
bomb.
but this is the one which is
Cesium.
they say is the most
Yeah,
freely
yeah,
available, and likelihood of it falling into hands of people who want to misuse it.
yeah. But the Israelis did this dirty bomb testing 2004 to
It does,
2012. It doesn't work.
I'm telling you, na, sub kiloton TNW uh, will damage a small town, a block in a city with a few hundred casualties. Use them in an open space, very few casualties.
Very few.
The effect, what happens in a nuclear explosion is that at the point of impact, the speed is around 260 kilometers or miles per second or something like that. So it is the speed and with the way the speed at which the shock waves travel that they cause destruction to the buildings and the casualties caused by the destruction of the buildings.
Hmm.
Radiation, etc., will take place, but the radiation effect, we draw concentric circles. By the way, I mean, I don't want to get into the science of it. We draw concentric circles from the point of impact, and then we see and we calculate the wind speed, and we see the whether it is a wooded area, whether it's an open area, whether it's an urban area. So those calculations, those templates exist. So in my own time, whenever I've also studied all this nonsense, we've drawn these templates and we've been able to calculate as to how much of casualties takes place. This kind of simulation keeps taking place, and how much of effect on the radiation, and what are the necessary equipment, and what you need to do, dosage, etc. I mean, I don't want to get into technical details,
So
but yes, all of us are trained to use the equipment, and we are made to study, and we so don't think that the Indian Army is ignorant. We're very much aware. Uh, we have our kits, and we know where they are and how to be carried, how to be used. Everybody is trained to use that. The only thing is,
absolutely,
it feels very hot. You start sweating a lot in that suit once you wear it. It's
obviously,
bloody sweaty.
bloody sweaty. I'll
Yeah,
take three more questions, sir. First one: how should one assess the sanctity of NATO Article 5 if US invoked in war on terror and Europe dragged its feet in Iraq and Afghanistan? May I just say this? The US actually went to the war on terror with Article 4, not 5.
yeah.
Why would the US not balk now in Ukraine and Europe given the threat to the mainland US?
You see, NATO Article 5 is what? I mean, any attack on a NATO country is an attack on NATO. That's what it means. Russian impact, right? So I want to question this very thing about Ukraine. In our last talk, we discussed this, and I spoke about it. Is NATO actually going to absorb Ukraine? There was only one statement which came about in the last 1 week, wherein they said, yes, we will definitely consider.
That is the future of Ukraine. That's what they said.
Yeah, that's the future of Ukraine when you're talking about. So Russia is going to be very careful. It's not going to do anything which is outside Ukraine, and because it is not fighting NATO, from as a principled enemy, it is not fighting NATO. It is fighting against Ukraine. It is Ukraine which is being made to fight by others. Had it been left on its own, by now it would have been gobbled down. But then since 2014, they've been trained. They have been regularly supplied. They have been psyched to believe that they will be part of NATO, which has not happened till now. And will it happen is a different story. So Article 5, yes, uh, threat to mainland US. I don't think there's any threat to mainland US. Only it will take place in case of a retaliatory strike. If the US makes a strike in heartland Russia,
Hmm.
then you will have a strike on mainland US.
That, yes,
The
absolutely.
probability exists only then. Yeah.
We forget the point who in NATO counterattacks. Will it be UK, France, or USA? Anyone who chooses to react should be ready for the sacrifice of one of their cities. Do you think NATO has that much unity? Can I also add, sir, uh,
Hmm.
just a little addendum to this question? The UK and USA, of course, 51st state. The French aren't like that. French are in NATO without their nuclear weapons. They assume complete freedom in their choice. So how do you see this? And they
There
very,
is
as a matter of fact, they also put out a statement saying that we will not retaliate with any nuclear weapons in case it has been used in Ukraine.
Yes, they made a very categoric statement that
So,
France will not retaliate with nuclear weapons. They are independent minded as well. When it comes to the US and UK, they are, of course, UK is just a stooge for the United States, right? But unity in NATO, it's already showing it doesn't exist on ground. I mean, within the armed forces, maybe yes. I want to just put across a simple point. NATO forces are not prepared to fight to the degree that we think they can fight. They are all looking behind their shoulders at the United States.
ah,
You see, they don't have that kind of forces. I mean, there are a total of there were only total of 4 battalion groups, NATO battalion groups. Now they have been increased to 8.
eight.
8 battalions, 8,000 troops. Okay, 10,000 troops. Come on, give me a break. So when you look at, you know, they said we will supply so many tanks. Just 2 regiments. I mean, what are 2 regiments of tanks? So all those who understand warfare also know the viability of NATO. It is just looking back at at United Kingdom for their forces and to the US. And when it comes to the US, it's not a land, it's not a land army based kind of a force. It's more of a maritime and a air power. It's not a land based power. We've seen what has happened in Afghanistan and how badly they fared when it came to fighting. So they may be special forces and all that you see them going here and there. Uh, I have seen American troops cry when they leave for war, actually weeping. I've seen it. So not a single Indian soldier when he leaves his home and goes into battle is going to cry. I've seen them weep. I've seen them at the airport weeping. I've seen it with my own eyes, so I know it. So NATO is there's not much of unity. They're just looking back. They think the Uncle Sam is going to be helping them out, and Uncle Sam today has got his worries elsewhere.
Yeah,
He's
they're woking up their army. That's all I will say, sir.
Yeah.
With the
No,
nonsense they're doing to the armed forces, it's
no, they're looking at, you see, their fear is they're looking at Taiwan, they're looking at China. Uh, the major fear is today if China invades Taiwan, what will they do? What will be their response? And that is what the Chinese are also gauging. So this is a kind of a battleground which is being closely watched. The outcome of which is being closely watched. Because will it embolden China to get into UK correction into Taiwan? How will the United States react to it? Is the United States capable of reacting in the way it should against China? What will be the reactions? Things like that. So there is Uncle Sam is busy elsewhere. This is just a diversion.
This is a sideshow, sir. He had to
This
divert himself off Afghanistan. Afghanistan सब भूल गए.
uh, Adi, I just want to take your mind to what has been happening of late. Uh, if you are aware, Iran is the next flavor.
Yes, sir.
So soon, Ukraine's going to be forgotten and the attention diverted to
Iran.
Iran. They're making grounds and they're going to be diverting because they know they can't do much in here. You trust me, the attention is now all. You see the statements coming about, and Afghanistan's gone into oblivion. Iraq nobody talks of, and Syria, Libya once in a while only when you're talking about, you know, people like me and you discuss it. And tomorrow Ukraine will also just become one part of a discussion. It will be Iran, and the attention will get diverted. So these are all diversionaries. Main focus is elsewhere, and a big worry is also elsewhere. Just put it that
Exactly.
way. And so are we. I mean, that is how we. I mean, as India, we are also not worried, but we are looking at fighting the Chinese as they are the ones which we are looking at. I mean, Pakistan is inconsequential as of now. So the the entire world is actually looking at China, not Ukraine has just happened, and nobody wants to actually get into it. Or the Americans don't want to get into the Ukrainian soil at all.
They have to build their economy before they fight China. So MIC को थोड़ा start up
That's
करना
what.
पड़ेगा.
So
And the last question, sir. Sir, I think even if EU unites against Russia, don't you think there'll be a split in EU when it comes to China? And of course, there are also protests happening in the EU in various different countries, sir. So how do you see both these things?
you see, it's all economics. It's all economics. Why China? It's all economics.
You said it, sir.
It's got nothing to do with human life. Is a different story. It's all about economics. If you're an economic power, if you have the mullah, you rule the world. And as far as Europe is concerned, trust me, Europe is in a very bad shape. We know it all. There are countries which just don't want to have anything to do with war. The people don't want to have anything to do with war. And there are protests in Germany, there are protests in France, in Italy. People are coming out in the streets and saying no, no more war. So people want peace. People want to live a peaceful life. People want to progress in life, and people don't want to face hardships.
Mhm.
And people do understand that uh, trade with China has always done them good. After all, they're all dependent. So are the Americans dependent on China. We know it,
Yeah.
and so there is a lot of money involved in all this, and it's all economics. And there will be a split. And NATO, I think they should just be dancing to the tunes of Natu Natu, and that's it.
Oh God, that's a good one actually. NATO NATO.
Yeah, I
That just
mean,
released RRR, right? That's the name of the movie.
yeah, triple R.
Triple R.
Yeah, so there will be definitely there, and not all countries of Europe are part of NATO at the same time. I mean, let's face facts.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know what is the contribution? What is the I must just narrate this to you. When Afghanistan, we had ISAF, right? In the stabilization force, which was there,
Yeah.
international stabilization. What is the contribution? I, I forget the name of the country. It was there, part of NATO. But how many troops did it contribute in Afghanistan? One.
है
Yes, sir. One soldier.
क्या करने आया था सलूट मारने
हाँ, मैं आपको I wish I remember this is an old one, but I remember that in Afghanistan, a NATO country had just contributed one guy. Some people had contributed a squad, six guys. So
Yikes.
people do not maintain forces. There is no requirement of countries to maintain forces. So uh, to defend themselves. So they have a very small force, which forms a part of a bigger, so-called NATO force. But they contribute towards that. Otherwise, there's no need. You tell me what is the need of the French to have a proper army?
Why does
I'm
why
just
what
saying.
does British need with nuclear weapons?
Yeah,
There's no need.
there's no need. But when it comes to these countries, there is hardly any troops which are there. I mean, how much is the contribution of Romania, or whether it is, uh,
Lithuania and
Lithuania and Slovakia and
Slovakia.
all that?
Hmm.
In fact, I remember the Military World Games. I was responsible for a certain portion of it in the World Military Games, and there was participation from all over the world. It is second to Olympics, the scale of it. And the soldiers who had come to fight, we later on discovered were actually their athletes, civilian athletes, and they've been given, National Guard status, made to wear uniform and come and compete as a preparation for Olympics. They don't have forces, regular forces. So NATO, don't think NATO is like as huge as an elephant. Like, it's not like that. It's not American forces. It's not the Russian forces, or It's not the Indian Army and the kind of force that we have. No, they're very, very small. They're just contributing.
It used to have a certain force at some time, not anymore at least.
No, the Americans used to be there in Stuttgart,
Yeah, yeah,
in Germany, and that was why, because of West Germany, that kind of scenario. The
yeah.
Americans, uh, yeah, in Stuttgart, the base there, the Americans had deployed they had a base over there. Then the Germans threw them out. So there was a lot of dissent against them as to what are they doing here on our soil. So they were asked to leave. So NATO is, as I said, NATO, NATO.
So,
Just need to
and
dance.
Jack Sparrow says, General Sir, thank you so much for keeping the country safe. We are indebted to your service. Indeed.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much. I like the name and I love the movie though. And it's always good to be on Adi's show and talk about issues and talk frankly about issues and share one's little bit of
Absolutely.
knowledge.
That's what this platform is all about, to have a fireside chat, a light-hearted fireside chat about some very important issues so that it can reach people. It can actually, people can fathom what these delicate issues are. Because if we sit down and talk like, I mean, nothing against the think tanks, but like major think tanks who expect you to have a base knowledge of a lot of things before you actually sit for those seminars. Uh, the general public does not have that kind of time. And I'm, in my small little effort, I'm just trying to make this information a little more accessible to people. That's also. And thank you so much for helping me out doing that, sir. Of course, uh, this topic does not get much resilience within India because people are, oh, yaar, Ukraine bahut dur hai. But we must understand this war is actually changing the world. Having said that, sir, the previous couple of shows have got me some very interesting comments from my Western audience, who actually mentioned that you guys have gone a step further into uh, a discussion which actually does not happen in India or even abroad for that matter. Somebody from the UK actually told me that I've never even heard in UK such discussions happening. So That was a great compliment, and thank you so much, sir, for doing the research and spending the time with us. Till next time, sir. Jai Hind.
Right. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, and I hope the audience. Well, I put forward my candid views, and I hope it's of value to you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, it is, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
Jai Hind.